Articulates measures to gauge our progress and effectiveness in moving forward and moving towards those objectives. I encourage citizens to take a look at the document, which is available on the city's website and in the lobby of City Hall. Like a majority of my council colleagues, I truly believe that this year's budget is a truly balanced budget. This is a long-term responsible solution to address the city's financial issues, not an approach that delays the inevitable or uses one-time solutions to systemic problems. Clearly, it can be difficult to even discuss revenue enhancement, and the decision cannot be taken lightly. I can confidently say that this course of action was absolutely necessary, considering the economic downturn of the last 5 years, painful cuts in state funding, and the decline of the city's tax base by nearly 20%. The increase, which will cost the average homeowner approximately 18 cents a day, will completely eliminate our budget shortfall, allowing Saline to continue to invest in the things that matter most, like infrastructure and public safety. While this budget does address some long-term major issues, we're not out of the woods yet. This solution does not completely rectify our predicament, so it's important that we work together to make other important steps towards finding solutions. We're already on track to doing just that. For the first time in our city's history, we are aggressively marketing all municipally owned vacant properties with a local, professional, commercial realtor. We understand that our long-term interests are best served when those properties can be transferred into the private sector. That means that properties can help open a new business or allow an existing business to expand, and will generate revenue by adding properties to the tax rolls. We're also continuing to explore new partnerships to streamline services and save money. The Rec Center Sustainability Task Force is looking at improving the financial stability of the Rec Center, recognizing that it is a profound asset to our community and serves our residents well. I'm also proud of the ad hoc group that I spearheaded along with School Board President Holden to look at strengthening the partnerships between Saline Parks and Rec and Saline Community Education. I'm optimistic that something tangible can come from both of these groups, particularly as recommendations will be made to Council by the end of summer. As a city, we continue to work to save residents' precious resources in every action we take, working to establish parity among our bargaining units and non-union employees in their contributions to health care insurance, pay freezes, and contributions to post-retirement income. It's important to conserve resources now, but it's also vital to consider ways to save money in the long term. As a city council and as a community, we are pleased with the performance and the leadership of Police Chief Rennick. He had some big shoes to fill, but has risen to the task and demonstrated an extraordinary rapport with his staff and with the community at large. The police department has successfully transitioned to 12-hour shifts, and we are continuing to monitor this policy. The idea was offered by staff, and after thoughtful review and analysis, City Council voted to make the change. The fact demonstrates that Saline City government is not about top-down decision-making. We make decisions with deep appreciation for the needs and opinions of our on-the-ground staff. The change to 12-hour shifts also made it possible for us to promote 3 officers within the department. This represents a welcome culture change for this department, ensuring that talented staff know there are opportunities for advancement. Although not technically a part of city government, integral to our community's public safety system is our fire service. I have the honor of currently serving as chair of the fire board, and Councilmember Peters also serves on the board with me. We've begun to put in place a 10-year plan that will gradually increase staff compensation to be comparable with other fire safety professionals in our county. This increase is necessary to attract and retain talented staff, and they deserve it. On principle, I believe that those who risk their lives to keep us safe deserve a living wage. Our city is moving forward on comprehensive sidewalk inventory. Once the inventory is complete, we'll begin to talk about strategies to promote walkability and connectivity. This year, we're able to fund 2 vital road projects. The first on Saline River Drive, a residential neighborhood whose existing street dates back more than 2 decades. The other includes a portion of Woodland Drive in the heart of our industrial park. We're also working in preparation for a major street project on Ann Arbor Street in the next fiscal year. During my first 6 months as mayor, I've met individually and along with staff with a number of developers, owners of existing businesses, and people who are interested in making an investment in the Saline community. Obviously, not all of these meetings will yield concrete results, but they are critically important. Business people and entrepreneurs need to know that their good ideas are welcomed and supported by city leadership if they choose to open their doors or expand in our community. Just last Friday, we hosted a luncheon and program for some of our larger industrial and commercial businesses, and the response was very positive. We are committed to hosting these meetings more regularly, and we'll hold another one this fall that focuses on retail businesses and the service industry. I'm also proud to announce that at our last EDC and TIFA meeting, we commissioned an economic development work group, which will consist of board members, officials from the local Chamber of Commerce, and area business owners, to look at the city's development plans, promotional materials, and assist with the implementing of a business retention and attraction plan that was provided to us by Ann Arbor Spark. I've always believed that good government communicates actively and aggressively with the people it serves, and volunteerism and civic engagement are also vital to realizing this goal. Related to our recently approved budget, we will be holding 2 town hall meetings, one on July the 25th at City Hall and the other on August 6th at the Saline Senior Center. Not only is this a great opportunity for people to learn more about the budget we recently approved, but we also hope to hear from residents to hear their insights and perspectives on how best to move forward. We are already working on transferring the ownership and management of the municipally owned Be Saline website, which has been underutilized since its inception. The site should be managed by a core group of citizens with the aim to have it more connectivity and engagement with the Saline business community. Earlier this year, I talked about how important it is for all issue-specific task forces convened or established to include at least one community member, and that goal has been realized. In addition to the groups I mentioned, we also have reestablished the Oakwood Cemetery Task Force and created a Resident Support Services Task Force under the leadership of Councilmember Rhodes. Both groups are working aggressively to fulfill their respective goals. One of the reasons why this community is so exceptional is because people get involved, and we continue to need people to serve on our various boards and commissions. We also need people to support 3 upcoming signature events in our city: the 18th Annual Celtic Festival, which takes place next week, and of course Summerfest and Oktoberfest. This council has been and will continue to be forward-thinking. We are acting very aggressively and proactively on a number of issues, including looking at tax abatements, the impact of proposed elimination of state personal property tax revenue, and expanding public transportation and accessibility, and also considering a property maintenance ordinance, to name just a few. What I've discussed tonight is just a snapshot of all of the activity that has taken place in these first 6 months. In January, I mentioned one of my heroes, President John F. Kennedy. Tonight I'm reminded of another, President Harry Truman. I think of him because he understood the importance of speaking the truth, of seeking the truth, and acting boldly. He was never one to let political divisions or the wide scope of problems deter him from action. I'm confident that my colleagues will continue to partner with me and embrace this spirit so that we can move forward together. Thank you to Mayor Pro Tem Linda Tahar and Council Members Burgoyne, Peters, Rhodes, Gearbaugh, and Roth, and our hardworking and dedicated city staff. In closing, although Saline continues to face a whole host of challenges, I still believe that our best days are yet to come. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless Saline. We now move on to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury. I noticed on the minutes there was a FY14 strategy plan that Mr. Campbell had prepared that's on the agenda, and it was talking about walkable community, which I'm interested in. There was comments on the non-motorized trails and bike paths, but nothing was stated on the sidewalks. I appreciate that the sidewalks are on the agenda tonight. As I've stated before, the first and the last mode of transportation is going to be our feet. And I am hoping that you will have a plan tonight to address fixing the sidewalks, as there are some that are very horrendous and dangerous. And I would hope that that is a main source of transportation. Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there additional citizen comments on agenda items? No, then we move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Is there a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
It's been moved by Rhodes to approve as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Gearba. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries. We move on to unfinished business, item 13-100. This is ordinance number 748, an ordinance to amend sections 58 through 278 of the Saline City Code to regulate the ignition, discharge, and use of consumer fireworks. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt and the reading of ordinance number 748, an ordinance to amend sections 58 through 278 of the Saline City Code to regulate the ignition, discharge, and use of consumer fireworks, and to approve and adopt or not to adopt said ordinance number 748 as submitted. Mr. Burgoyne.
I'd like to move to, I wanted this split into parts A and B so that we could consider change in wording, because the penalties in here are severe and have not kept up with civil penalties that we have in our code. So I'd like us to use the civil penalties, and I handed out a...
Yep. So why don't you, based on what you just articulated, then it sounds like you would like first a motion to acknowledge receipt. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Burgoyne to acknowledge receipt and reading of ordinance number 748. We'll just leave it at that. So it's been moved by Burgoyne. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tahar. Do you want to start? Yep. Mr. Burgoyne, I'll turn it over to you then.
Right. Well, under the, what is being changed in here is to not allow fireworks between midnight and 8 a.m.
No.
And the ordinance...
No, Mr. Burgoyne, it's 1 a.m. 1.
1 a.m. and 8 a.m., which is good for New Year's, because New Year's at midnight. But another part of this has a penalty of up to $500, plus court costs, plus whoever would have to defend would have to have an attorney, plus costs for disposition of fireworks. And this includes things like the use of sprinklers, these sparklers, in driveways by kids under 18. My neighbors have, young kids, and they use sparklers in their driveways. So I'm thinking that the penalties, the old style penalty, is so severe, and this was established about 20 years ago. And about 10 years ago, we progressed to civil penalties. So my suggestion would be to change E from the following. Right now, E1 says a violation of this ordinance is a civil infraction punishable by a fine of up to $500 plus the costs of prosecution. In other words, court costs and so forth. And to change that to what I put in my email, a violation of this ordinance is a civil infraction punishable by, and the wording would change to fines for civil infractions as listed under section 58-407 civil penalties of the Saline City Code. Now, for a lot of the ordinances, Saline has changed to these civil penalties. You don't go to court. You get the money directly. The first fine is $25. The second instance is $50. Third instance is $100. It seems as though, and I talked to several people about this, and they thought that the court fees, cost of prosecution, plus fine of up to $500 was just out of proportion for some somebody less than 18 having fireworks, somebody having fireworks after July 5th. I do know that the tent that sells fireworks next to Ruby Tuesdays will be open until July 9th. And if somebody buys fireworks on July 7th and they're from Saline, it'll be past this time. So I'm thinking, I'm listening to my neighbors, and they're saying it sounds excessive to catch somebody on some technicality, and then instead of a $25 fine, they've got this huge problem, and they have to go to court. So that's the issue that I wanted to bring up.
Okay. I'm just going to speak very briefly to this issue because, as all of you are aware, and those of you in the audience and those who will be watching at home, this council has spent a lot of time on this issue, and we've leveraged our contacts in Lansing to stay abreast to the progress that this legislation has made. And of course, it passed overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate and was signed into law by Lieutenant Governor Calley in Governor Snyder's absence. The one thing I want to make clear is the final version of the law stated that if you are a municipality, if your population was below, I believe it's 30,000, or if you were a municipality in a county with, I believe it was less than 700,000, something in that neighborhood, Clerk Rutledge, you were only permitted to ban the use of fireworks between 1 and 8 a.m., not 12 and 8 a.m. So I just wanted to make that clear. And we did have, I actually had Interim Clerk Rutledge confirm that with legal counsel before printing up and distributing the support material this evening. So just wanted to make that clear. Okay.
So that is different than what's stated in this package that we have? This package on page 2,
Section B, Section 7.
It says 1.
Section A, says hours of 12 midnight, 8 a.m., or between the hours of 1 and 8 a.m. on New Year's Day. So that we can, in fact, do 12 to 8 and then 1 to 8 on New Year's, according to this document.
You're on page 2, Mr. Rhodes?
Page 2,
B
third one
refers
from next to the last paragraph, section 7, 2A. Or does that only, or does that
That's-
not apply because we're not a large enough?
My understanding would be it wouldn't apply because the definition,
Read B. B talks about less than 50,000 or, B says a local unit of government with a population of less than 50,000 located in a county with a population of less than 750 may regulate the ignition between the hours of 1 a.m. and 8 a.m.
Under 2A, I think 2A applies to us. We are a county over 750.
no, we're not. No.
County?
No, not even close. No. 750,000?
Oh, we're not.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
my
I guess-
understanding
I
is
guess
that
you're
it would be to 1 to 8 a.m.
Okay,
That'd be my
I
understanding.
withdraw my.
No, that was a good question. Mr. Roth?
I want to call the attention to the House Bill 4743. Let's look at page 3, section 12, number 1. A person shall not ignite, discharge, or use consumer fireworks on public property, school property, church property, or property of another person without the organization's or person's express permission to use those fireworks on premises, except for otherwise provided section. A person that violates this subsection is responsible for the state civil infraction and may be ordered to pay a civil fine of not more than $500. So does that give us the leeway that Councilman Burgoyne is suggesting?
Yes, because the key word in section 12.1 would be in the last sentence where it says, "and may."
I just want to make sure that we have clear understanding.
Yep. Okay. Mr. Har?
Yes, thank you. Just a point of clarification. As I read the proposed ordinance, low-impact fireworks like sparklers are not,
Exempt.
are exempt from this regulation. So
Okay.
that issue is not as I understood it, is not actually an issue in
Yeah, I
this.
appreciate that. Let me clarify, and actually, I didn't, although I got my water bill today, I didn't look at the FYI newsletter, so I don't know if there was an article in this FYI newsletter about the new fireworks law and what's appropriate and what's not. We had talked about that, so I can't confirm that or deny that. But yeah, Ms. Tahar is absolutely right. So in 2012, the legislature basically legalized what are essentially commercial-grade fireworks in the state of Michigan, which had previously been illegal. And that's when all the tents popped up, and that's when the stores that had retailed similar products began to expand their inventory. It has become, in many areas, especially those areas that are densely populated, a public safety issue, and if they're discharged and ignited at strategic or particular times during the day, it's also a nuisance, quite frankly. So many of you and many of my colleagues and I have had discussions that this is a very difficult thing to enforce, which absolutely it is, but I truly believe that most good people in our community want to follow the rules if they know what the rule is. So part of this is sort of an education, there's an educational component to this issue, which is making sure that our citizens know what's appropriate and what's not, and then also making sure that people know that they are welcome and encouraged if people are discharging and igniting commercial-grade fireworks at inappropriate times of the year or times of the day to call the Saline Police Department. So, here. Do anybody have any comments? I mean, the first motion is to acknowledge receipt, and then we can really get into approving the ordinance and talking about Mr. Burgoyne's suggested language. Mr. Gearbaugh.
I was just, your clarification about the fireworks that are considered low-impact fireworks helps a lot more understand what that is. I prefer what I think the state has put forward. I don't like to make things that are different than what the state does, and they don't want us to be more stringent than the state does. But I think being consistent with the $500 fine and everything that's in place, considering that it doesn't mean low-impact fireworks, I'm fine with that aspect.
Okay.
I was confused about low impact.
No, that's quite all right.
But it's
Quite all right.
Call for the vote.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. The previous question has been called. Let me first ask, does anybody have any additional comments? No, then we can proceed directly to the vote then. It's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Tahar to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. And then the second motion will be a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt said ordinance number 748 as submitted.
Move to approve and adopt.
Okay, it's been moved by Gearbaugh to approve and adopt.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. Discussion. Okay, well, did you have a comment, Mr. Gearbaugh?
No, Mr.
No,
Rhodes.
Mr. Roth, okay.
No.
Or Mr. Rhodes, excuse me.
Yeah. The ordinance says punishable by a fine of up to $500. So who determines the actual amount? How is that set? And do we need any other guidance besides this?
Sorry. My head is elsewhere today. Yeah, I know what it is, but a violation of this ordinance is a civil infraction punishable by a fine up to $500 plus the cost of prosecution. I don't have, we would be requesting typically the maximum amount, but I can't answer that question. I apologize.
Mr. Burgoyne?
I believe this would go to court.
Correct, right.
And when it goes to court, whoever has a son or daughter or themselves involved in this would have to have an attorney, and that's a cost. And then there would be court costs, and court costs are several $100s. And the cost of prosecution probably includes our costs. You know, if we win, that could be onto the individual, plus whatever the fine would be. And if it's a first offense, it's probably not 500, it might be 100, 150, you know, some fine. But if you add it up, you've got the court costs, which might be $400 or $500. You've got attorney fees, and then this person is seized with fireworks. Of course, they'll lose in court, so their cost might be like $600 or $700. So I just think it's a lot.
Okay, Mr. Campbell.
If I can, and thanks for rattling my cobwebs. Yeah, if this goes to court, and typically, certainly, Mr. Gwynn is right, if someone chooses to have their own attorney, but there are certain court-appointed attorneys at no cost, and that's what you typically see when you go to court. I mean, and you look at the docket, and it's kind of one after the other, if you will. And so as far as additional costs, if they had a court-appointed attorney, there's no additional cost to them there. But then the judge would have the ability to assign whatever level up to that $500.
Plus the court costs are a lot.
Yeah. Mr. Rhodes?
So given the complexities and the costs of enforcing this, would it be fair to state that we might see warning tickets being given out by our police department for an individual maybe who has violated this thing?
That would be totally up to the discretion of the officer.
Okay.
Additional comments? Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, that was another issue. You get into arbitrariness if, an officer knows how much of an imposition, how much it costs this is going to be, doesn't write a ticket in one case and writes a ticket in another case, and it doesn't seem even. And if you have civil infractions where you do not go to court and all you do is you get the money yourself here at the city, and the amounts are less. And it seems to me that you can still enforce it without slapping the citizens as hard.
Yep. Mr. Campbell?
I'm not sure exactly what you're saying, Mr. Burgoyne, when you say about them not enforcing it equally. I do believe our officers do enforce it equally. So I don't want to read anything into what your comment, but to potentially suggest that our officers don't apply the law evenly across the board, I would disagree with that.
Well, equally, that would mean you would always write a ticket, right? If somebody offends, you would have to always
That's why officers have the discretion.
Mr. Roth?
My interpretation that I think we can still live with what we have proposed here under penalty number 1. The violation of this ordinance is civil infraction. We all can agree upon that. That's agreeable. That matches what the state has said. And punishable by fine up to $500. That gives us leeway. It could be $1, it could be $500. Plus the cost of prosecution. If they didn't go to court, there would be no cost. So if we handle it as a civil infraction, held it within the city, within our city here, with our fine structure, doesn't need to be stated in here. We can implement this ordinance as stated.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. I would just add, I appreciate your comments, and of course, if any section of this ordinance becomes unpopular, or if a majority of council seek to revisit it or revise it, that is something that can obviously be entertained. This is an issue that council has spent a lot of time on of late, and it is an important issue. The unfortunate reality is that although the state has moved in the right direction of giving us a little bit more latitude in the way we regulate commercial grade fireworks, they still haven't given us enough latitude that I would deem to be appropriate. I think there's a big distinction between igniting and discharging commercial grade fireworks in a rural area that's not densely populated versus doing it in Wildwood or Northview subdivision. It's not only a nuisance, but it also becomes an issue of public safety. And so I'm comfortable with the verbiage as currently stated. Again, I think this is, there's an educational component to this, and we need to do our utmost to make sure that our citizens know what's appropriate and what's legal. I'm hoping that maybe something can go on the website or in our email update, because I'm assuming that this is going to pass and take effect at a very appropriate time. And I also think that it's appropriate that the penalty be not severe, but strong enough to discourage behavior if somebody is cited. So I will be voting in favor of the motion. Is there additional discussion? Mr. Gearbolt.
Just a notification, I just hope that we start enforcing this like right away. In the last couple nights, we've had some significant fireworks going off, and in fact, last night I saw one go off that was in Canterbury Park, but it went off somewhere over the houses on Ann Arbor Street, and so it's quite clear that violations are happening. This was probably about 10 o'clock, but again, according to this ordinance, it won't be happening. But it's happening in town, so as soon as we can get some action on this, I appreciate it.
Very good. Okay. Mr. Burgoyne?
Are we certain that we have the authority not to prosecute with this language? That we can do it as a civil infraction without putting the words in there?
Do you have anything to answer that question?
I mean, that's what Mr. Roth said, but it's not, here it talks about prosecuting in this language.
The only place it talks about prosecute is if there's a cause for prosecution. There be no cost, it's a mute issue.
A violation is punishable by fine plus cost of prosecution.
What page and section are you on specifically, Mr. Burgoyne?
That's the section I was looking at, which is
Oh, okay.
E, section E, page 2, E1. And I was thinking that E1 in terms of penalty would be better for us to have our civil penalties here, which are not as severe. And then if you wanted to make it more severe in a future year, you could come back and make it more severe.
Okay.
But every person I've talked to think it's more reasonable for us to use our civil penalties than go through the courts.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and I respect that. Again, I think there's a big distinction between using very benign fireworks that have been legal in Michigan for decades versus using these commercial grade fireworks, which again are not only a nuisance but can be a public safety issue. It says that fines can be punishable, or the punishment could be the issuance of a fine up to $500, which doesn't mean it would be $500. And I just think that we go with this for a year, and if we want to readdress this and analyze it to see if there's room for improvement, whenever for that matter, that would certainly be, I'd certainly be amenable with that. But again, I would recommend adoption of the motion to approve, moved by Gearboss, seconded by Roth. Okay? If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to approve and adopt said ordinance number 748 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries. So staff will, I'm assuming that we'll work to disseminate this information and get it out there. Very good, thank you. We move on to unfinished business, item 13-106, economic fact sheet. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the 2006-2013 amended economic fact sheet and to approve or not to approve the 2006-2013 amended economic fact sheet as submitted. Before we entertain the motion, Mickey Jo, why don't you come up and maybe briefly go over how we tried to incorporate everyone's suggestions and thoughts?
Sure. Well, as you may recall, at the June 17th meeting, you guys were presented this fact sheet that was originally deprived as just a quick, what originally was thrown together is just a quick tool to be able to get some numbers out there. And then the more we started discussing the town hall meetings, the more we wanted to make this an operating tool for everyone to use and maybe more of a handout. So Joanne, my deputy, was here at the last meeting and she tried to incorporate the changes. As you'll note, the one that she emailed you earlier last week has been revised a little bit. There were some comments that didn't make that draft that we did in the one that we handed out in the package. So we hope we've addressed everyone's comments and concerns. It is a little hard to get everyone's input on there, but I think the final document, if it's approved by you, has some very valid information, and we're willing to start circulating it and getting the word out and educating the public.
Very good. Thank you, Mickey Jo. One thing before we open it up for discussion, just to underscore something that our city treasurer said is, well, I'll reiterate a point that I made at our previous meeting, which is this document has been through probably about 20 drafts or in revisions since its inception, probably over a month and a half ago. And your comments were appropriate and timely, and for the most part, I think their incorporation into this document was beneficial. Obviously, there was a balance. We tried to, we came at this from the perspective that everybody couldn't get everything they wanted, but we wanted to try and create a document that everyone was comfortable with, and that more importantly, told a narrative, told a story in a very accessible way. And that could be used as a resource in advance of our town hall meetings, but also to supplement the information that's shared at those town hall meetings later this month and early next month. So I'll open it up for questions if people have any. Mr. Burgoyne.
Yeah, I had presented, I had asked in terms of the chart that shows the residential tax bill, which goes between 2006 and 2013. I had asked for that to also show a dozen years prior so that we get a true picture over time. So I don't think this shows a true picture over time if you foreshorten it and only, kind of pick a high point and then go downhill from there. And I thought it was going to be incorporated, but it didn't change.
Well, let's get, that's a fair question, and it warrants discussion. Mr. Burgoyne is referring to the chart on the third page of the document, which is entitled Average Residential Tax Bill, City Taxes Levied. And he would like to go back further than 2006. It was my assumption that there was consensus not to do that, but we'll gauge that at this time. So I'm going to start at this end of the dais. Mr. Roth, do you want to change that bar chart similar to what Mr. Burgoyne is saying, or would you like to keep it as is?
I'd like to keep it as is because everything is referring to 7 years.
Okay.
That's the concept.
Okay. Mr. Gearbaugh?
I'm fine as is.
As is. Mr. Rhodes?
Fine with it the way it is
Okay.
also.
Ms. Tahar?
Yes, I understand Mr. Burgoyne's point, but since the rest of the brochure is specifically geared to this time period, I think it's better to keep the chart consistent with that.
Okay. Mr. Peters?
It's fine, we could pick this to pieces, but let's just move forward.
Okay. I'm also in favor of keeping it as is. Okay. Are there any other additional thoughts? Okay. All right, then I'll refer back to the motion. I need a motion to acknowledge receipt of the 2006-2013 amended economic fact sheet and to approve or not approve the 2006-2013 amended economic impact fact sheet as submitted.
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Gearboss, seconded by Ms. Tahar. Is there any additional discussion? So I'm assuming, Treasurer Bennett, that after approval tonight, I'm assuming this motion passes, we'll get these printed off and they'll be made available, City Hall, Rec Center, libraries, they have a nice space there as you first walk in.
And a website.
And a website, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
City
Maybe we
Hall,
could
Rec
also-
Center, and Library.
Yeah,
and then
maybe
the
we could
website?
also put several of these in each council member's mailbox, so that they would have the ability to disseminate it to interested
Okay.
parties.
Sure.
Okay, and then, of course, this will be available for review and distribution at both of our town halls.
Saline Main Street office also.
And Saline Main Street office is an excellent idea as well.
All right. We'll
Okay.
get that
Very
taken
good.
care of.
Thank you for your work on this, and please thank Ms. McDonough as well. Okay. All right, it's been moved by Gearboss, seconded by Tahar to approve and adopt. Mr. Burgoyne has one additional comment.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against it, not because information shouldn't be put out, but true information should be put out. And foreshortening this like this and giving a certain spin to it, it just isn't right. You should get a true perspective over time. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. If there's no further discussion, it's been properly moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Moving on to new business, item 13-109. This is MML Board of Trustees election. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the official ballot for the 2013 Michigan Municipal League Workers' Compensation Fund Board of Trustees, and to approve or not approve the official ballot as voted, and to authorize or not authorize interim clerk Rutledge to sign said ballot and return the ballot to MML no later than August 12th, 2013.
Move to approve and authorize.
It's been moved by Gearbaugh to approve and authorize. Is there a second?
Support.
Supported by Mr. Rhodes. Discussion.
I just will make a comment. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 candidates and 7 votes.
That's correct.
So we're just good, making an even slate.
Correct.
Not eliminating anybody.
Correct.
Nor are we adding anybody.
Correct. Yep. Any additional comments, discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries. Move on to new business item 13-110. This is People's Park 207 Monroe Street property. First motion will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 18th, 2013 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs regarding People's Park development recommendations from the Parks Commission, and the June 26, 2013 memo from City Manager Campbell regarding 207 Monroe Street property. Is there a motion to acknowledge receipt?
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Okay, it's been moved by Burgoyne to acknowledge receipt. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh. Maybe we'll have Mr. Campbell comment second if you would like to. Ms. Scruggs, can I invite you up to go over your memorandum?
Well, thank you. The Park Commission, at our May meeting, we had some discussion regarding the property, the Karpinski property that the city acquired, and the desire for City Council to have the Park Commission review this and to make some recommendations based on the park users and what we felt would be best for the park. And so we had a walkthrough, and everyone had a chance to really take a look and ask good questions and see how the park was operating, where the property lines were and whatnot. And after extreme discussion and review, we came up with some recommendations that we would like council to consider when making some decisions. We felt that the Park Commission felt that a space of a parking lot of about 30 spaces would be great on the south side of the park, on the south side of Annie's daycare area. We felt that 30 spaces was sufficient based on the most use that the park gets is between April and August, and that's for the baseball season. And as you recall, in years past, I'm not sure how many years, at least 25 years, we have leased the property just north of Annie's daycare for parking for SAYB&S for the baseball use. And during the rest of the year, the park gets mostly people walking in neighborhood use for the tennis courts or the basketball court or whatnot, or just for walking through the non-motorized pathway from Monroe Street to Ann Arbor Street. So that was the primary recommendation. And the other recommendation was to keep a portion, we estimated between 25 and 30 feet on the north side, just to keep it as a buffer between park users and whatever, I'm assuming residential area of the property that we're going to be selling. Just so that when you get down, if you have the map, down towards the ball field, there's a big grade or elevation between where the ball field sits and the property line. And there's really no good place to sit unless you're right on the backstop. So we wanted to keep a space there. That way, people using, watching ball games or whatnot, they don't have to cram down next to the backstop to watch the games. They could, put a lawn chair out or whatnot and feel very comfortable. And we would create some type of a screen or I'm not sure what. It's just in general, some ideas, something so that the residential area would be screened from the park area. So those are the three items that we felt would be very useful in considering. what's
Are there
happening.
questions for Parks and Rec Director Scruggs? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just curious, where does the trail lead, that cuts through People's Park and that goes all the way to South Ann Arbor Street?
Correct.
Where does it come to Monroe Street? Or isn't there one really laid out?
It doesn't. It comes out in left field of the ball field.
Okay.
And also, it comes around to the south side behind the ball field, where, like, just south of where the basketball court is.
Right.
So there's two areas that lead from Ann Arbor Street into People's Park.
But it really doesn't connect to
It
Monroe.
doesn't necessarily connect right to.
So really, the benefit of actually having that additional 25 or 30 feet, we could put in there could be a path put in there to connect to the whole thing.
Yes, definitely, yes. And one thing I failed to mention is keeping that strip of property just to the north. Potentially, we could have some type of a drop-off area for people that are there, like equipment drop-off, or for elderly people to be able to get to the ball area. Maybe have like a quick little drop-off, someone with maybe some, physical disabilities off there, and they can do a turnaround and drive back out.
Yeah, to make it large enough for like a
Like
private
either
road
a
or
T
easement into it.
turn or a circle, either one.
Any additional questions, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Nope.
No? Mr. Burgoyne?
In terms of the trail connecting over to South Ann Arbor area from the People's Park area, isn't the one on the southerly side where to the back of the ball field, south of the basketball, and more or less the entrance where the parking would be, wouldn't that be a more direct route? If you came from the north, there's a grade change and so forth. So wouldn't it be just as good to just go on the south side of the ball field and just take a straight shot out to Monroe?
Either or for the trail, that either or would be fine, but I think keeping that strip of property for a vehicle access to the ball field for equipment and also for, like I said, for dropping off people with some mobility issues would be very helpful.
Park maintenance.
Additional questions, Mr. Burgoyne, or was that it?
Well, I do want to talk about B and C, but I
Yep.
don't need to do that now.
Correct. Mr. Peters?
Well, I just think it's a really sound plan that takes our future needs into consideration. And typically, when you walk from Saline and Arbor Street through the park, and you're going to go out through the south path that goes on the high side of the park, you kind of just make a loop around the ball field and go. And it really, truly would be easier if you were heading over towards the cemetery to stay on the left-hand side, or the north side like you have here.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty good route. The south side, it does have a lot of great elevations. And I think with the 25 or 30 feet off to the north, that still gives us about 80 feet of frontage. I know we talked about that at one time for a potential buyer. I'm going without a survey, just Google Earth, but I don't know if that would be enough or not. I suspect it might be.
Mr. Rhodes?
I appreciate the Parks Commission and the time they spent on looking at this and trying to maximize the benefit to the city in a potential sale. And I agree with the 30-foot, 25 or 30-foot setback moving that property line, but I'd like to suggest that the property line, which is currently just west of the tennis courts and runs north-south, that's the point where that extra 30 feet start or stop, so that we don't detract from the frontage headed on out to Ann Arbor Street. For a couple of reasons. One is the wider the frontage, the more attractive that property would be to a potential developer, and the more they would pay for it. And the second thing is that, and I would agree, I would assume that would be some kind of a residential development in there. That development is going to have setback requirements, which is going to keep any structures away from the property line anyway. So if we move just that portion of it over 30 feet, and then buildings go in there, there's probably another 30-foot minimum of setback requirements. So then you've got 60 feet or so away from the activity at the park. So I think what Parks Commission would like to see can be accomplished, and by just extending that property line over, which is currently north and south between the daycare center and the tennis courts, and leaving the rest of the property untouched.
So just to get this straight, say you pull into the parking lot at Annie's, and you drive straight back, there becomes like a drive right next to the tennis court. Is that where you're saying start to jot out right there?
That property line right there that is the north-south one would be extended over the 30 feet.
Okay.
And then you'd run onto the back of the property. That leaves the access roadway completely on Parks property and provides the seating for the ball field.
That would accomplish
which you
the
would like
same
to
things
have.
we're trying to achieve.
Okay. Mr. Peters?
Are we clear on our legal claim to that drive that goes past Annie's? Could there be some kind of a relationship change it would someday
I
allow
believe
us-
that stays with not the property owner, but the property itself. The city has.
Before I would agree to a change like Mr. Rhodes states, I would want to
Right.
make sure that we've got that in writing, that we do indeed in the future always have access to that drive-through,
We do.
so we don't get locked out.
Mr. Burgoyne, did you have additional question for Mrs. Scruggs?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as Mr. Peters is thinking. I talked to Carla on Friday about this, and my suggestion was to keep it 25 in my suggested wording in this second item, to keep a 25-foot strip from front to back, starting at Monroe Street, because I didn't know that we had a 100% sure claim to that driveway. If we do, that would be okay. But my thought also was to recommend that the Parks Commission be involved in looking at the site plan and helping to negotiate so that they could trade off the first 25 feet along the driveway for something better near the ball field. And a developer probably would want to do that. But unless we have a 100% sure claim to that driveway, I would want us to keep a piece near Monroe. So until we know that,
Mr. Campbell can comment to that question, Mr. Burgoyne.
Sure, that is staff's understanding that it's, that when the city sold the property, the city maintained its with a deed. However, if it would make council more comfortable, we could bring that back to the next meeting as well and put that in the packet so you saw it. So if that makes you all feel more comfortable, we can certainly do that.
yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, just keep the 25-foot strip for now, and then later on, don't keep it if we're 100% sure.
Are there any additional questions? I do want to stay focused on this motion because some of the discussion is creeping into parts B and C. Are there additional questions for Ms. Scruggs regarding her memorandum? No, then I'm going to turn it over. Thank you, Ms. Scruggs. I'm going to turn it over then to Mr. Campbell, because this motion also pertains to his memo dated June the 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The two items, you may recall the 4 parcels that are on the east side that are adjacent to the east end of the 207 Monroe Street property the city owns. And we did get a lot of research time went in by staff to, specifically through the assessor's office, to determine whether or not those 4 parcels are part of People's Park or not. And with the information we were able to find and talking with, we also talked with our former city attorney, Mr. Grossman, as well as our current city attorney. And the opinion that our current city attorney has is that those 4 parcels in question can in fact be sold as part, if they wanted to be transferred and joined, that they are not part of People's Park. So, so having said that, then the next question, the next point in my memo was regarding the direction council wants to go for selling of that property. Did the council still want to contract with a residential real estate broker to represent that property for the city? or not? And if so, how do you all want to go about assigning that? Did we want to assign a certain agent, real estate brokerage here in Saline? Did we want to send out an RFP like we did in the originally a number of months ago? Or so that's the staff's just looking for direction.
There are questions for Mr. Campbell? Mr. Roth?
Yes, my question is, wasn't this parcel included in the previous RFP? And where do we stand with the contract that we've made with that particular realtor?
Originally, it was. However, council directed staff to remove it from the group, so it stands alone at this point, not represented by anybody.
Mr. Burgoyne?
In terms of the buffer strip between the park use and the residential use, it makes a lot of sense that there would be a buffer there. What role can the Parks Commission play in addition to having some space of their own next to People's Park, reviewing or somehow helping to create some buffer in the first 20 feet of the residential development itself? You know, how that's specified, what type of noise barrier there will be in terms of plantings or...
So, just to be clear, Mr. Burgoyne, so you're asking if the parcel is marketed and if a developer acquires it and then proposes to the Planning Commission some sort of residential development,
Correct.
what sort of influence or say would the Parks Commission have?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
My understanding would be based on history, and I believe we did this when I was a member of HDC probably 5-6 years ago with the then proposed Concannon development, was we issued an advisory opinion that then was submitted to the Planning Commission for consideration. But you may choose to elaborate, Mr. Campbell.
Sure, thank you, sir. Yeah, I would absolutely would agree that those types of things where, for instance, in this case, the parks bordering that potential development, that the Planning Commission would seek their thoughts on it, any proposed development and design thereof.
So it sounds like in addition to the 25 feet of buffer that the city would keep, there could also be a little bit of buffer or some influence in the buffer on the development side.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially. Okay. Additional comments from Mr. Campbell regarding his memo and report. Mr. Gearbaugh.
I'm fine with including those additional parcels since we've researched and determined that they are not part of the park, because I know that would cause an issue with the ordinances. And I'm fine with listing it. The other potential you could do on that first 30 feet or the property that Mr. Rhodes had mentioned about, potentially putting an easement on that so that we would have that access over it and still sell as part of the property. Just depends, because I'm not sure how they're going to put a drive in to access this property, and I would think they probably would want to go more towards the side of the south side of that property in order to get an easement into the back of that property. I don't think they're going to want to put a drive right down the center of their frontage. Just a suggestion, we could look at that aspect too.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the acknowledging of receipts for memos received from Ms. Scruggs and Mr. Campbell? No? Okay, then it's been properly moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Gearbaugh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. B would be a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt the recommendations by the Park Commission for People's Park as outlined in the memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. Mr. Burgoyne.
Well, I'd like to move a substitute motion, B, as in my email.
Amen. Do you have an email?
And I'm open to having that adjusted as needed. The reason I'm doing this is that in the wording from the Parks Commission, the word annex was used, and also it wasn't totally specified in a way that it would be a city council motion.
So what you're moving right now is B then, is that correct? B in your email communique dated June the 29th.
Right, but I'd be open to just receiving that to discuss it and then move whatever the council wants, change this wording however you want it. I mean, I made a stab at it. The parts of it that I think are important are not to make the land that's kept part of People's Park before the residential development occurs, because then you don't have the ability for any give and take without going to the people for a general vote of the community. That would just be just too hard. So to avoid that is important. Another part of it is that funding south of the daycare for the parking lot can be from TIFA funds, and I just thought we could just say that.
Let's do this, Mr. Burgoyne, so council can thoroughly discuss this if that's their wish, and they can offer amendments which you can accept as friendly amendments, or they can offer amendments that you don't accept, and we can vote on them as unfriendly amendments. But your your item B in your email dated June the 28th, which would be a motion to support the recommendations from the Saline Parks Commission by 1, directing staff to designate TIFA funds for construction of the requested parking lot of about 30 spaces on the south side adjacent to the tennis courts. 2, retaining the southerly 25 feet of main parcel at 207 Monroe Street with the intention of creating a buffer between park users and residential area. 3, directing staff to ensure an appropriate level of screening will be developed between the park property and residential development during site plan review process. And 4, directing staff to keep the Saline Parks Commission involved in site development process to get the best outcomes for both the park user and new residential development. Why don't you just move that motion?
Okay.
Okay, so it's been moved by Mr. Burgoyne has moved that motion. Is there a second? I ask again for a second, or the motion will die. There is no second, that motion dies. So we go back to the initial motion, which is a motion to approve and adopt or not to adopt the recommendations by the Parks Commission for People's Park as outlined in the memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. Is there a motion, or what is the intent of council?
I could move to approve with a slight modification.
Okay.
In that property line per my earlier comments.
Okay. So that would be really an addition to the memorandum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus the memorandum seems unclear. It seems as though this would make it part of People's Park right away and take away your flexibility.
Yeah, well, let me just, I hear that, Mr. Burgoyne, but Mr. Roth offered a motion to approve with an amendment being made to the initial memorandum. Is everyone clear about what Mr. Rhodes is suggesting?
Are we still talking about the 30-foot or 20, we keep saying two numbers, 25 and 30 feet. But does that extend all the way to Monroe Street? Or are we first going to look into the paved portion as to the future of that, and do we really have access to that forever?
Yeah,
Or has that been put to rest already?
My motion was to the 30-foot dimension as requested by
As is.
by Parks, with the one change in extending the property line that currently runs between the tennis courts and the daycare center, move it to the north, and then from there to the rear of the property, that would become the property line. And I could make that dependent upon verification that we do in fact have permanent access to that space.
Would you be willing to add that to your motion?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I would.
Okay.
And just as a, well, I guess there should be a second before
Yeah,
anything else.
so Mr. Rhodes' initial amendment is to rectify some of the lines in really the topography that was provided, which Ms. Scruggs said she would be comfortable with. And then I do want to, based on what you just articulated, Mr. Rhodes, I do think there's value in adding some verbiage to the motion. So the second part is contingent upon staff verifying that we have access to that driveway?
Correct.
Okay.
Do we know what we're doing here? Are we making this part of People's Park right away?
Why don't we bring it back when everybody's cleared? Excuse me if I may.
Yep, absolutely.
We want certainly council to be as comfortable as you all can be. So instead of saying, putting conditions on it, but again, our staff's understanding is that it goes with the land. It's on the deed. However, to help you all make you feel more comfortable, I would suggest holding off on this and we bring it back with those documents attached to hopefully help you all feel more comfortable that this is more of a better idea to move that property line. That's just a suggestion.
And I'm fine with that. I also want all council members to be comfortable with it. And, you know, one of my goals here is to maximize the amount of unencumbered land that we're going to put up for sale.
Yep. Okay. So you're going to withdraw your motion, Mr. Rhodes?
I am.
Okay. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you care to comment?
I was just going to comment, yeah, I think if you worked with, well, the daycare center too, to make sure both property owners are all satisfied with whatever would be the best access for both properties would probably be beneficial. Instead of making two individual curb cuts, you might be able to do one single one that benefits all of us. So,
Okay. If that's the direction and intent of council, I'm very comfortable with that. Then it would be my recommendation that we suspend with this motion. And just to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row, I would also recommend that we not move on the third motion either, and that B and C be brought back in some form at our next regular meeting on July the 15th. Mr. Burgoyne.
Discussion on the third part. We already have had a request for proposals on properties, and we did get a response from Reinhardt, which was the best residential broker, and they came in at a rate which was lower than the other rates. It was 6%, and they were willing to and capable to market it. So I don't think we need more RFPs. I think we already had an RFP, and we already have a significantly prominent broker in residential. So I would like to make the motion now that we give the city manager the authority to move forward, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign with Reinhardt brokers at 6%, and that the city manager and the broker and the assessor get together and figure out the right price to list this at.
Okay, so your motion would be to authorize
The mayor and clerk to sign a
contract with
standard brokerage agreement, subject to review and approval by the city attorney, of
Okay.
course.
Did you want to enumerate that 6% in the motion?
Yes, because they had responded to the RFP that way, and they should be willing to honor it.
Okay. I'm just going to let Clerk Rutledge write out your motion, and we'll have her read it back to you. Or read it back to everyone, excuse me. So authorize the mayor and clerk to execute or to sign an agreement with Reinhardt
Brokers at 6%, subject to review
and approval of legal
and
counsel.
approval
Okay.
of legal counsel.
You want to read that back? Okay, Mr. Burgoyne, Clerk Rutledge is going to read that back and make sure that that is, that you're comfortable with this verbiage.
Okay, to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the agreement with Reinhardt Brokers at 6%, subject to review and approval of legal counsel.
Sure.
Okay? Mr. Burgoyne has moved that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second. Discussion. Mr., okay, none of the movers. Mr. Roth.
I would vote against it because, like I mentioned before, I'd like to have a clear definition of exactly what the property is that we're putting up for sale. I don't like to have any negotiating afterwards. This is the piece of property. This is what we have. And then once they purchase it, they go through our planning commission and meet all regulations, so we should be covered. So I don't like to have any iffies about it. I don't think it's ready for sale yet, since we don't know what the piece is. And I'd like to have this piece identified at our next council meeting so we can approve the piece before we sell it.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you have a comment?
I would just like to make it all as part of the motion when we know exactly what we're selling, do it all at the same time. I think it can be covered at one point. I don't want to put the cart before the horse yet.
Correct. Mr. Rhodes, did you
I
have a
also would
comment?
like to hold off for now.
I'm fine. I'll withdraw.
Withdraw. Mr. Peters, you're
Yeah, I
comfortable
believe
with
that what we spoke about was we were going to later on decide exactly what this policy. Right now, we're just agreeing that Reinhardt would be the seller. So that was my understanding.
The motion that Mr. Burgoyne offered and that you second would basically to proceed with executing an agreement with Reinhardt Realtors at 6%, subject to review and approval of City Council. However, 3 of my colleagues or our colleagues indicated they're not comfortable doing that at this time. I would share that
No,
sentiment.
I withdraw
Okay.
it. I withdraw
With
it.
Mr. Burgoyne withdraws, Mr. Peters is comfortable with that. Okay, the motion's a moot point. So basically, B and C, colleagues in some form will come back for your review and consideration on the 15th. Okay? If there's nothing further on that front, we move on to new business item 13-111. This is Saline Celtic Festival tent rental and installation. This will be in motion to acknowledge receipt of the June 26, 2013 letter from Amber Soletto on behalf of the Saline Celtic Festival to approve or not to approve the bid for American Rentals in the amount of $13,218 for the 2013 Celtic Festival tent rental and installation, and to authorize the mayor and interim clerk to execute agreement, with American Rentals after review and approval of the city attorney.
Move to approve and approve.
Second.
Moved by Burgoyne to approve and authorize, seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh. Discussion. Mr.
I
Peters.
just wanted to make a quick point. I think there's maybe some misunderstanding out there in the community. And that is this $13,000, what the Saline Celtic Festival Committee does is it'll take and basically borrow $13,000 from the general fund, from a pool of the general fund that is dedicated to supporting arts and culture. It'll take that $13,000, go out and rent its tents and porta-johns and its tables and chairs, and then we make the money back through ticket sales, sponsorships, and grants. And after we make the money back, we take all the money and put it back into the general fund again. So that's the nuts and bolts of how it works. Yes, we could get a rainy day, and should we get a rainy day, that's what the rainy day fund and the 501c Friends of the Celtic Festival will be used for.
Appreciate you sharing that, Mr. Peters. And I would add that rainy day fund, the 501c3 fund, that would have to be exhausted too prior to using taxpayer resources to cover any outstanding debts. So, yeah, I appreciate you clarifying, because there is some misconception out there, and that's an important distinction to make. The other, and I outlined this in my State of the City address, which is the Celtic Festival is a very iconic event which brings a lot of attention and recognition to Saline, and is also an outstanding outlet for volunteers in this community. So we're looking forward to it, and it's just a week from this Saturday and Friday. Mr. Roth.
I agree with your comments, but I'd like to make a statement. Several months ago, I was quoted as being confused, saying they didn't even make, maybe the numbers would show they didn't even make a profit for last year. There was a bunch of jumble of numbers throwing at us, and I asked for that we would have some kind of recollection through our monies that our accounting system, the Celtic Festival accounting system, and their 501c accounting system, and all these months have transpired. I have no numbers to see, and we're in the heart of another festival. I'd like to have real numbers, and I'd like to have them shown in front of us so I can speak fully and know the bottom dollar on things. I'm much in favor of the 501c3, but I have no idea for sure what numbers are there, what they're holding. We have numbers thrown at us, but I have nothing to verify it. And I've been making several requests for it, and I don't know why it's been taking so long.
Treasurer Bennett can comment to your questions, Mr. Roth.
Yes, thank you. Amber and the Celtic Festival have been very adamant at getting us as the finance department the numbers. They did go through and totally they went through every aspect of their accounting records and have supplied us with the books, and Joanne and I have been taking those numbers in, and I don't mean any disregard, but it hasn't been our highest priority right now. Their 501c3 did get all reconciled, and they do have a bank balance. I don't know the exact amount of it right now. Those are the numbers. Where the confusion came into between the city numbers and the Celtic numbers are, the Celtic has been requested by the city of Saline to establish this Friends account. And so when their proceeds, they come back and pay us back, and then they put the money into their Friends account. That money is not reconciled through the city, and so those numbers were provided to us, to the city, and it is it just not been, because there is a positive fund balance in there. I have just not been able to get all of that together into a report, but there is a positive fund balance, and it's over $8,000 that the the Friends of the Celtic Festival have. What we wanted to do, what Joanne and I wanted to do, is go back throughout the years and say, when they report a profit, they were reporting a profit including that money, and the city's books don't show that money because it never comes into the money. The other thing that I did get copies of when Amber sat down with me and met with me was that all the 501c3 and all that information had been taken care of. So that is my fault for not getting those numbers to you. This Celtic Festival has been very adamant about providing us the numbers in a very timely manner.
Can you share the numbers that was provided to the IRS application for their 501c3? There's requested a financial statement from them. Can that be made public to, at least to the council members? And also, has a 501c3 been approved?
Yes, it has. All that paperwork was turned in at the...
Well, it can be turned in, but do we have the approval?
Yes.
Have they received the
Yes,
approval
sir.
from the IRS?
Yes, sir. That information
Well, I'd like
came
to see that
the treasurer's
documented.
office. So I will get that information, and I will run it through the city manager's office, and I'll get a report to you. That is just, I have not been able to get that to reconcile exactly at our last work meeting with the Celtic Festival. We wanted to be able to show how come the city of Saline said this is how much you made and this is how much they made, and taking that back and reconciling that has been a time consuming, because we're talking 10, 12 years of separate account, we reimburse the bills and stuff like that. So I wanted to try to present it in a, here's what they've said, here's what we've said. But I think it's all going to work out fine, and we do have the numbers that they've presented. They have the positive fund balance, and we have been replenished on an annual basis for the last couple of years. So I will give you a report, and I will try to have that by the July 15th meeting.
I believe fully last year they came out ahead, but far as when they're playing the numbers and throwing the numbers around, there can be different interpretations of it according to the way they report it.
I understand that, and that's why I kind of wanted to make sure that I had a clear report that reflected our audited financials. So that would take some time to reconcile, and it has just not been, at the top of my priority list. I should have reported back to you that, yes, the numbers have been turned in. They were turned in very timely after that work session. Amber has done a fantastic job at going through and pulling those numbers together, and she also provided me with her approved 5013 docket and copies of their bank recs, which is, a pretty substantial effort on their part, and I appreciate what they've done, and I don't want any delay in this reporting has been solely on our end, on my end.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Appreciate that. Mr. Burgoyne?
Over the years, the city has kept track of the costs to the city alone, not the 501c3 and so forth, just to the city alone as of each audit. So I think what would be important from the city's point of view is to see where we were as of the prior audit. And then if there were some costs that came in afterwards through the end of the calendar year, those probably could be figured out too. But it seems to me that I'm just interested from the city's point of view and just to know that there is a private 501c3 standing over there, which helps to safeguard the Celtic. And from my point of view, I don't need to know all the details of that private organization.
Great.
They're just there to help.
Okay. Mr. Peters, did you have an additional thought?
Well, just say there's a lot of good people working very hard on this, and we've worked very well with the city. There's been good rapport. And I take a little bit of offense to these statements of we're playing with numbers, we're throwing numbers around. That's not true. These are good, honest people. We're with the best intentions of the city in mind and the Celtic Festival in mind. And I don't think there's any smoke and mirrors here. And yes, we are a legitimate 513C. It took a while, but we finally got it. As we all know, 513Cs have been held up a little bit here recently in the United States. So I think, Mr. Roth, if you'd like to sit down sometime and have a meeting with Amber and myself and the treasurer, we'd be happy to do that and maybe clear up some of your concerns.
Well, this concern was made a public concern several meetings back. So I'm not trying to rub salt in any wounds. It's just something, and I'm very much in favor of the Celtic Festival, but I've been asking for real numbers for many times, and it's been several years the general public's been asking for real numbers. And I'd like to be able to come up with those real numbers in support of you folks. And the 501c3 thing, if you read the intent of it, it says that it can be the future operation of it and our step for the city to step out of it. And I want to make sure we're on track on that. So I'm very much supportive of that 501c3. I want to make sure it's a viable tool so the city can remove itself from the financial obligations we've been making commitment to.
Thank you, Mr. Roth.
And I certainly appreciate all the volunteer work. And I don't like to have this volunteer work thrown against purely budget numbers and factual information that I'm asking for. I certainly appreciate everybody's help and volunteer with it. It's a great event, but I'd like to be clear with the numbers of exactly where we're at. And I've been given so many different numbers for so many years, and I don't like being snowballed for so long, and I don't think our public likes it either.
Well, we will get you the information. Ms. Bennett committed to doing that, and we apologize for the delay. I would have to concur with Mr. Peters. I don't think anybody is intentionally trying to deprive any member of this community or the council of information. That being said, whatever information, financial information a member of council wants regarding this festival, we'll make sure that happens. I'm going to now refer back to the motion regarding the authorization for the Celtic Festival Committee to accept a bid from American Rentals for tents and installation. Are there any additional comments regarding this motion? No? Then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to discussion items. The first is commission and committee reports.
Couple.
Please, Mr. Peters.
Yeah, just like to remind everybody, we have the Green Thumb Award that's put on by the Parks Department every year. If you have a neighbor that has a nice garden or a neighbor that takes a lot of pride in your garden, and it doesn't have to be a big fancy garden with a lot of money, some expensive home. If you have someone in your neighborhood that you'd like to nominate, please do. You can get these forms online or stop up at the City Hall and get a form and simply put their name and address down. And the Parks Department will put a nice yard sign in their yard that says you've been nominated for the award. And at the end of the year, they pick some winners. Again, the winner doesn't have to be the most expensive yard. So it's a very nice program, and please try to take part if you can. And just one more plug for the Celtic Festival. It's the weekend after the 4th, and there's going to be a lot of good food and fine family entertainment. And I hope you come down and join us. It'll be a beautiful day in the park. Thank you.
Real quick, Mr. Peters, on the Celtic Festival front, the activities, people really seem to enjoy the pub night in the park on Friday night. What time does that begin?
5.
5. And last till?
11.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Burgoyne?
Under discussion, at the end, I would like to add an item, Service Center, which was handed out. So I forgot.
That's all right.
To bring that up.
We'll add that then after live broadcasting. Mr. Rhodes?
The Environmental Commission, last meeting, it's come to our attention that the rate of residential recycling has declined quite a bit within the city of Saline over the last few years. And while other communities have also experienced this decline, similar decline, the Environmental Commission has decided that we will focus on trying to come up with a way to ramp up those recycling efforts again in the residential area. One of the things that we will do is to create a public service announcement with the good graces of Chase Stanton and Channel 18 about recycling and what to do and how to do it and the benefits of it. And I believe that process has begun. And the other thing is we have a gentleman from Waste Management coming to talk with us about what products and procedures they offer to improve residential recycling. So if anything comes of that, it'll come back to council eventually from the Environmental Commission.
Wonderful. We would, of course, invite the Environmental Commission, if they'd like to submit an article to the FYI newsletter, to reach out to city staff. Want to make sure that those pages are available. If you want to,
we have done that.
Good. And if you want to do something specifically on encouraging recycling, that would be that'd be a welcomed addition. Okay. Additional commission or committee reports? No. Then we move on to reports or other announcements. Just have one real quick, Mr. Rhodes. I attended Representative Driscoll's coffee hour at the Saline Senior Center on Friday morning. It was a very nice event. I think everyone on the dais here is on her legislative email update list. If you're not, I encourage you to go to her website and sign up. And if there's a particular issue that's being discussed or debated in the state legislature, I encourage you to attend one of her upcoming coffee hours and functions. The other thing, and I mentioned this in my State of the City address, we did have a very successful business luncheon that was coordinated by our EDC and TIFA committees with the assistance, with a lot of assistance, I should add, of our new business ambassador, Ms. Korfman. It was a success. A lot of good information was provided by Spark and MEDC and the county, and there's some nice camaraderie, and I suspect, as I promised, we'll be doing that more often, and probably do another one in the fall with more of a focus on retail and service businesses. So Mr. Rhodes was there, Mr. Peters was there, I believe Mr. Roth also attended, but it was a nice event. Mr. Rhodes.
I received a notice today from SEMCOG, the Southeast Michigan Council of Government, that they're going to have a public meeting here in Saline on Wednesday, July the 31st, in these chambers from 4 to 7 p.m., having to do with bicycle, pedestrian paths, and amenities as part of their non-motorized. I didn't know that was coming to us, but here it is in print.
Interesting. I serve as the liaison to SEMCOG, and Ms. Tahar is the alternate. I didn't receive that email. Did you?
Not to my knowledge.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we've got a little bit of miscommunication, but nevertheless, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And actually, could you pass that information along, and we'll maybe send something out to all of council? Very good.
It was part of the update section of the newsletter.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Rhodes. Okay. Additional reports or other announcements? Mr. Gearbaugh.
I had the opportunity to participate a little bit in the Main Street Review last week, and Mr. Rhodes might be able to tell a little bit more about it. He participated all day, but we had a review from the main members of the Main Street program, and they were here for 2 days to assess what's been happening and giving ideas and feedback, and so we're hoping to get some information back on that. And then hopefully we'll be doing a citywide survey in the next couple of months, which will help us to assess what the needs and things are downtown and get people's ideas and help to look at what would be beneficial in terms of the type of customers we draw, the demographics, all that type of information. So looking forward to that aspect of it.
Great. Yeah, I believe Mr. Rhodes attended a number of those breakout sessions. Mr. Burgoyne and Mr. Roth and myself were at one early in the morning, which was geared more towards elected officials. I don't know if anybody else attended any of those sessions, but I found them very productive and very helpful. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Mr. Gearbaugh. Any other reports or other announcements? No, then we move on to the sidewalk inventory. You want me to begin with you, Mr. Campbell, or do you want to invite Mr. Fordyce up to speak to this issue and give us an update?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll let Jeff do most talking, but we have, as we talked about, we did have started. It is taking time, but we have started it, so I'll let Jeff talk more details about the sidewalk survey that's underway.
Thank you. City Engineer Robel and I developed a data form for the sidewalk survey, and then I selected a DPW staff member, and we sent him out kind of on a trial run to basically test the process. So he went out and did about half a dozen properties, and then Gary and I followed up, took his data forms, went out, looked at the same sidewalks to make sure that we were getting the kind of data that we wanted, that he was identifying the flaws that we thought were significant, and so that part went well. And we've been sending this staff member out as available to continue the survey. I should back up. Also, Gary worked with the Washtenaw County GIS service to give us a nice set of index maps for all the parcels in the city. So he's been going out as available to continue this process. It has been slow. Our staffing level and taking on the cemetery this year has changed our workflow a little bit, and the impact of bringing the cemetery back into our scope of services has been a little higher than I anticipated when I proposed that idea. So it hasn't been quick, but it is going well, and we are getting good data, and it's well organized for each of the parcels. While that's been going on, I had asked our city attorney to review our current ordinance on sidewalk enforcement, and not surprisingly, he concurred with previous assessments of what our enforcement options are. And then I asked him to propose some changes that would streamline that process, whereby we could avoid having to do a special assessment district to enforce this ordinance and get sidewalks repaired. So in concert with the ongoing survey and gathering that information, I'd like to bring back some proposals for an ordinance change. And, you know, we could look at a couple different scenarios and kind of get ahead of the game a little bit so that once we have all this data, we're ready to do something with it. So if that pleases council, I'll start preparing that.
Questions for Director Fordyce? Mr. Roth?
I was wondering if you had any timelines you can share with us?
Timelines?
Timelines as far as when the survey be done and when repairs can be done, so we can have this a safe, walkable community.
Well, again, at this point, with our available enforcement mechanisms, no, I cannot offer you a timeline on, you know, once the data's in hand, how long it would take to repair. So I think streamlining that process is really a key to it, so that we can do that faster. The survey itself, even if I was able to dedicate this individual full time to it, would probably be an additional another 2 months yet before it would be done, and I simply can't do that right now.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Fordyce? Mr. Gearbaugh?
If we were to give you the resources to do that, to hire another person to do it dedicated, or do you need to have somebody that's fairly well trained right now in our city staff?
Well, I think this survey is you know, maybe not ideal for a like a seasonal employee, but if we had like maybe an engineering student intern or something like that, that would I think be a good project for that kind of position. The main you know, with the reduction in full-time staff, we just kind of lose flexibility. So there's so many maintenance things that have to happen on a day-to-day basis, and then there's things that come up.
This is a type of temporary project where I would expect us to potentially have to hire someone to do this so that we didn't take away from the other. It's something that we don't normally do, and we could do it faster and quicker.
Right.
What type of percentage do we have done so far?
It's around 5%. On a parcel basis, not on a footage basis.
Okay, I'd like to see the timetable moved up much quicker. If that means we have to look at funds, we've tried to identify some funds for this, and I think we should be able to do that within our current means.
I think this is, to Mr. Gearbaugh's point, I think this is indicative of the fact, and we've discussed this on numerous occasions, that staffing levels are low at our Department of Public Works, and on occasion it impacts the quality of work and the effectiveness of that department. So I think it's strong consideration for hiring at least one additional employee has got to be a component of our budgeting process next year. To your point about amending certain ordinances or offering changes, would you keep me abreast to that? Because if you and legal counsel are going to be approaching council with various alternatives, that type of discussion, dialogue might be more conducive in a work meeting.
Right.
But I appreciate that.
Sure.
Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on what Mr. Fordyce said about an engineering intern. Now, my son's at the University of Michigan Engineering School, and I know that their main desk gets requests like this all the time. And I also know that there's some civil engineering students there right now that don't have a job that would like a summer internship. So what I would suggest would be for Mr. Fordyce to make a couple of calls and come back with authorization for a few $1,000s from fund balance next week, whenever we have our next meeting, 2 weeks from now, and just do it.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. I'm assuming based on Mr. Gearbaugh's comments, he would be amenable to that. Mr. Burgoyne, unless Mr. Fordyce already possesses these contacts, could you share with him some
Oh,
contacts?
I just am talking to the engineering students over there, and I hear rumors about,
Okay.
who doesn't have a job. It's just the engineering school.
Okay.
At North Campus, you know where it is.
Okay. Would other people be amenable to Mr. Fordyce reaching out to them and maybe coming back on the 15th with a recommendation? Mr. Rhodes, yes?
I support that.
Yeah, Mr. Roth, Mr. Peters?
Yeah, good job for civil engineering.
Yep, Mr. Tahar, okay.
Yes.
Got a little bit of direction there, Mr. Fordyce?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Any additional questions for our DPW director? No? Thank you, sir. Move on to live broadcasting, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chase, if you wouldn't mind wandering up. As you all maybe you may recall, one of the objectives for the last number of years now from council is that they wanted the ability to have a live broadcast of the city council meetings. And so working with community ed and the schools, they did purchase the PEG Vault.
Yes.
I actually remember the name now. The PEG Vault, the piece of equipment necessary to go live, and they've done all their testing. The last meeting, they did a test, and the signal was received back at the station, but before, because this is going to be live, this as soon as they flip the switch, it'll be live. There's a 5-minute delay, so if maybe somebody says maybe something that shouldn't be said over the air, we can kind of bleep it out. But I just wanted to have that discussion and see if there's any comments, concerns, questions, because it's going to be a little different than, it's on tape, and tape is, it's just like being on air, but it's not on air, right? We don't do anything, we just digitize it, and it goes out as a tape delay. But still, there is a little bit of different atmosphere, if you will, being live. So I just wanted to ask the mayor if we could just throw it out there, and maybe there are no concerns, but I want to check that, and then also just let you be aware that it's ready to go live.
Chase, do you care to elaborate at all?
No, I think Mr. Campbell spelled it out pretty well.
Okay.
There's a 5-minute delay, and so if there was an incident that was deemed inappropriate and we got the cue, we could cut it off and broadcast would end.
Okay. What's council's consensus? Ms. Tahar?
I have a question.
Oh, question.
first.
Yep,
Yes.
please, questions.
So in addition to the live broadcast,
Yes.
the already existing means of disseminating the council meetings will continue so that they'll still be available on the website and they'll be repeated on
Yeah,
the
this
TV
actually
station?
speeds up the process with the new PEG Vault because it's digitized initially, and so the signal is sent to the station as well as a copy of the actual taping, so broadcast can begin instantly after the night of the broadcast.
So, and it would also still be on Vimeo on the website?
Yep,
Okay.
and Chris can pull it off directly right away, so.
Great.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
And currently, the live broadcast is just going to be out over across cable, not across the web, right?
Correct.
Additional questions? Okay.
Yeah, so when will this start?
As soon as I get the
We
go-ahead.
Get a consensus
Well,
from this council.
I just wonder if a proposal was made, or if we need to make a proposal.
No, as I said, it's ready to go.
Start on the 15th.
Start on the 15th if you'd like.
Yeah. What's the consensus of council? Mr. Rhodes?
I have no concern with the live.
Okay.
I don't either. We've done this for 12 years. Yes, it'll be live, but I think we've got to put the things into place for 3-minute comments and all that stuff. I think we'll be fine.
Mr. Roth?
We're ready to go, let's go.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Mr. Peters?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Mr. Burgoyne?
No comment.
I think if you have concerns about live meetings, you probably shouldn't be on this legislative body, to be honest with you. So I think it's fine. Mr. Roth?
Like Mr. Stanton to make a comment, kind of the last meeting we had, I mentioned a concern about our picture quality, and he had a technician in, so if you want to give us a short report on what that answer is and what the solution could be.
Yeah, we had a technician come in and spoke with Chris Schonk and myself, and initially we believed it was just an issue with cabling and perhaps picking up a signal from the police station, something along those lines. But he did find out that it is the switcher unit, which the cameras come through it and it determines what's being sent out in terms of individual cameras. We're looking into options in terms of a used model to replace it with as to not have to buy a brand new one, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Chase, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Move on to our last discussion item, and this is one that was added by Mr. Burgoyne, the Service Center. Mr. Burgoyne.
Yeah, does everybody have a copy of this where it says to Todd, see attached, Catherine, and then?
Yep, that was put at everyone's chair tonight.
Okay. Well, what it appears to show on the first page, the first picture page, is a strip of land that the city owns, which is 879.44 times 66 feet across. Right here. And it also seems to show that the Zycom or Saline Electronics property is 2,300.2 feet long along the rail. So it appears that the piece of land that we have that covers the Saline Electronics side does not even cover half of the Saline Electronics side. So if we, and that land, since it's 897.44 times 66 feet, is approximately 60,000 feet, which is just short of an acre and a half. So that looks like $60,000 to $100,000 worth of land. So it seems to me that for us to retain it, like if you build it, they will come, you know, they still have access to more than half of the rail if they really want rail. Nobody's ever expressed the interest in rail so far. It seems as though, from the point of view of benefit to the city, for us to not put 70,000-ish, whatever it's worth, you know, in with the sale shorts us that money, and then we get a piece of land that's kind of left over. Now, I know Mr. Gerbo had a concern about blocking Saline Electronics so that they would not be able to have access to rail. But since they have more than twice the length of that, and we only cover less than half of the length of it, we're not really blocking their total land. So, and I know that part of the land in the front was sold to the court, but out of 2,300 feet, I mean, they have significant amount of land where if they wanted a rail spur, and the rail spur next to cross it for like one rail car, one or two rail car, is only a couple of hundred feet, you know. So you don't need 2,000 feet for a rail spur. So my thought is, why should we short our fund by that amount of money and then end up with this odd piece of land which later could be a problem to us?
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Do you care to comment? No? Okay. Okay. Very good.
I don't need a decision tonight.
No.
I'm just bringing this up,
No,
you know, as an idea.
Yep. We appreciate you sharing that.
And I have one more thing to request.
Please.
There was a Fireworks Act that was passed tonight. And it was implied that maybe we don't need to go to court, maybe it's a civil infraction, maybe we can handle it here. Could we ask our city attorney, is the way that it's written now allowing us to do it as a civil infraction so we don't have to go to court unless we really needed to?
Right.
Or do we need to do a little bit more to tweak it? So could we get a response?
We can contact legal counsel and report back on the 15th.
Yeah, that'd be great.
For sure. Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Are there any other discussion items? No, then we move on to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, and I'm here to talk about Relay for Life. I was a participant. They have acquired like $43,000. Last year was $23,000. The year before that was $13,000. So it was, the people that put it on are wonderful. And I hope you express your pleasure with all the hard work they did. In talking about the fireworks ordinance, normally ordinances are not enacted for 30 days after they're passed, but I noticed you have an emergency, which was not in the motion, so it takes effect, because I'm going, it don't take effect for 30 days, so that'll be interesting. You don't have to worry about it. The other thing is, Gary Rubel, last time, when we did the sidewalk survey, I don't know, 15 years ago, he and one of his helpers did the sidewalk survey. The other thing is, last meeting, you talked about, after our executive session, a settlement on the DPW roof, and yet nothing has been said of what transpired. And I didn't know if that's for publication or not, but it is our roof. The other thing is, as far as ordinances, there was a comment on whether we were, on the staff wages or whatever, if the ordinances were supposed to be printed. I thought all ordinances have to be publicly addressed, because how does the public know what the ordinance is if they're not in fact published? I don't know how that works with papers now. And I'm so glad, as far as the sidewalks, I appreciate. As far as ordinances, Mr. Burgoyne, you were so concerned about enforcement. It's amazing. If you read the sidewalk ordinances, there's some big penalties on that no one's had a problem on council with for a year.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there additional citizen comments?
Good evening, City Council. My name's Todd Lands. I live at 404 Woodland here in town. There's a few things I want to address, so I'll try to be real fast about it. First one is, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but I just want to say rest in peace, Charlie Berg. Charlie Berg passed away last Sunday. Mr. Peters was a great help with him. Thank you, sir. What I really came to talk about tonight was water bills. I don't know if you guys have heard the rumblings through the town, but there have been some outrageous water bills that have hit people. I had one last year, one of my clients. It was a $592 water bill that came to her after her short sale was completed. And understand what a short sale is. She was able to prove that she had financial distress and the bank was going to forgive her of her debt. And then we send her a bill for $592. It's just outrageous that our meters are that far off. And we couldn't forego fines or penalties. And this person is back up against the wall in the corner. So that was one person. And then just recently, since I had that story to talk to my clients about, I told this person that was selling here on Detroit Street, gee, water meters have been a problem. His bills have always been $80 to $100. Comes out at $236 for his final read. Wow. It's going to happen again and again. I know we're trying to work on it, but the postcard program that we used to do where people would verify their inside and outside meters just fell apart. And we need to get back on it, and we need to give a way to make citizens not have to pay fines or penalties, and give them a payment plan, you know, and make it so we don't piss people off, excuse me. Officer's discretion on tickets. I think civil for fireworks and first-time offense should be a low fine, like $25, and then $35, and then $50, and then $75, and $100. I don't know what we do. But these are legal fireworks. If they're not doing them safely, that's a problem. But, you know, every time I've ever even done just sparklers, I go out in the street and I wet down the road and I have a bucket of water. But I'm a Boy Scout. Not everybody is. But maybe if people are doing them safe, maybe they can do them without having a fine. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Since I know some of my council colleagues have as well received some inquiries regarding the water bill issue, can this be added to the agenda as a discussion item, and maybe you and Jeff can make a presentation, do a little bit of background information for us on the 15th?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Burgoyne.
Including how many meters were reading one way and the other way, and when that's
Correct.
going to be resolved.
The issue in its
Yes.
totality.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Any additional citizen comments? No, then, is there any other business to come before the Saline City Council this evening? All right, just to reiterate, we do have our next regular meeting at 7:30 on the 15th. We have a work meeting beginning at 6:30 to discuss property maintenance ordinance with our building inspector, code enforcement officer, and city superintendent. There will not be food provided at that meeting, just to be clear, 6:30. And then we have a regular council meeting at 7:30 PM on the 5th of August. We do not have any absences this evening, so I would seek a motion to adjourn at 9:27 PM.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Peters. It's been moved by Burgoyne, seconded by Peters to adjourn at 9:27 PM. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. This meeting is adjourned.